Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into a fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty wild personal theory that connects three things you would absolutely never think to put in the same sentence. So, our story kicks off way back in ancient Egypt, with a pharaoh who decided to turn the whole world upside down. We're talking more than 3,000 years ago, when Akhenaten tried to do something completely unthinkable: get rid of all the gods and replace them with just one. Then we're going to slingshot thousands of years into the future, landing in 2001, right into the bizarre and famously baffling universe of David Lynch's cult film Mulholland Drive.
And our last stop? It's right here, right now. It's in the world we all live in, specifically in those silent, anonymous voices we see everywhere in internet comment sections.
Okay, so a pharaoh, a film, and a digital ghost. Seriously? What could these three things possibly have in common? Well, let's get into it and unpack this theory that tries to weave them all into a single, pretty provocative story about Western civilization itself.
The whole idea here is built on something called psychohistory, and the concept is pretty out there. It basically suggests that entire civilizations can experience trauma, just like a person can. And those traumas, they don't just disappear, they echo for centuries.
And here is the absolute core of the argument. It's the claim that Akhenaten's big, radical experiment, worshipping just the sun disk, Aton, and the fact that it failed so spectacularly, was a kind of foundational trauma, a primitive scene, if you will, for the entire West.
So the thinking goes like this. The collapse of Akhenaten's revolution set off a massive chain reaction. It supposedly sent the whole region into a mysterious dark age. And then, out of the ashes of that collapse, what emerged? Well, only the two cultures that form the very bedrock of the West, ancient Israel and Greece.
Right. I know what you're probably thinking. How on earth do you get from an Egyptian pharaoh to a surreal movie from 2001? Well, the person behind this theory says you need a very particular set of psychoanalytic tools to even begin to see the hidden patterns. To get this, we need to look at two different ways of seeing how groups think. You've got Freud, who basically saw a crowd as a hypnotized mob all looking up to one leader. But then you have this French psychoanalyst, Jacques Lacan, with a much weirder, more complicated idea. He suggested that your identity isn't really in you at all, but that it's a reflection you catch in the eyes of other people. It's a trick of the light. And that idea is absolutely crucial here.
Now, this leads us to a real mind-bender of a concept, the simulacrum. Put simply, it's a copy of something that never had an original. I know, it sounds weird, but think about Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships. The idea of Helen was the simulacrum, an image so powerful it could start a war, far more powerful than any real person could ever be.
So here's where we start connecting the dots. The theory argues that the real historical queen Nefertiti becomes a kind of simulacrum, just like the mythical Helen, and then, damn, David Lynch's Mulholland Drive is seen as a modern-day retelling of this exact same ancient story. I mean, it's got all the same themes, crazy rivalry, switched identities, and even a murder that happens because someone mistakes a reflection for a real person. Okay, let's bring all of this into our time. How is this framework used to make sense of the weird, anonymous world of the internet? So, the theorist started presenting these ideas online, and for the first 70 sessions, crickets, almost complete silence. Now, most people would think, well, that's a failure. But instead, he started to analyze the silence itself, treating it like a clinical symptom of the group. Eventually, comments did start showing up, but they were all from anonymous accounts. You know the type. No history, no profile picture, nothing. Just a username. The speaker compares these to impersonal voices from a famous case study on psychosis, almost like disembodied messages from numbers that have learned how to talk. And this is where another one of those Lacanian ideas comes in, the semblant. Just think of it like a meme, a crypto token, or your online avatar. It's a placeholder for an identity. It's a pure symbol with no actual person behind it. It's an identity literally made out of code, interacting with other codes in silence. This is where the theory takes a massive leap, from online comments all the way to our own DNA. It reframes the whole debate around genetics, arguing we shouldn't have anonymous data collection. Instead, it pushes for nominative conservation, where our genetic code is tied to our unique name. With places like Denmark exploring a copyright on personal DNA, it forces us to ask a really fundamental question. In this digital age, are you your name, or are you just your code? Okay,
So all of these pieces, the history, the psychoanalysis, the digital echoes, they all build toward one single and, self-described scandalous hypothesis about the secret origins of Western identity.
So here's the climax of the theory, laid out in 4 steps. 1. The big trauma happens during the Dark Age. 2. Hittite tribes migrate into what will later become Greece. 3. And this is the really wild part. They completely flip their own history, pretending they weren't the migrants but the conquerors. And step 4, the real bombshell. The theory claims the biblical Exodus story acts as a simulacrum, a massive cover story for this other, more deeply hidden migration.
So what holds this entire sprawling theory together? It argues that figures like Nefertiti, Helen, and their modern movie counterparts are the keystones. The idea is that the way feminine identity is copied, transferred, and turned into myths across all these stories is the real key, the thing that unlocks this repressed history and makes us ask what our own identities are even built on.
Look, it's a complex and pretty dizzying theory, for sure. But it leaves us with one last kind of haunting question to think about. If our identity is really just a mashup of code, myths, and forgotten memories, who or what actually holds the key?